Good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome back to Tech of a Tea. This is episode 133, and today's guest isn't a YouTuber like I would normally have on. Today we have someone involved in, I guess, Linux blogging and Linux development, Flatpak stuff. Welcome to the show, TheEvilSkeleton. How you doing?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm doing pretty good. If anyone goes onto places like r/Linux, they've probably seen your articles floating around every so often. Because I noticed that you do tend to post like pretty much every single one of them.
Yeah, I used to like my first, and I think like another article I did post it, but after that, like someone else was just posting every single article.
Mm. Well, they're all really well written, so it kind of makes sense why they get posted.
Thanks.
For anyone who may not know your name, just do a brief introduction of what you tend to do.
My name is Harry. I'm also known as TheEvilSkeleton online. Um, like I'm mostly involved in GNOME and Flatpak related stuff. I recently became a member of an open source project called Bottles, which is an application to run Windows software on Linux. Um, and like I've been writing a couple of articles about GNOME and Flatpak, especially like refuting a lot of the misinformation
Hmm.
around these projects. And I'm trying to be like as objective as possible, and also like as how can I say this? There's objective, and then also professional and
Mm.
less like opinionated.
Yeah, yeah. There's certainly a lot of very opinionated. I'm definitely at fault for this as well. There's definitely a lot of opinionated takes out there on whether it's flat packs, especially snaps. And well, the app image guy does that to himself, so that one he can't
Yeah.
really complain about. But I think the first time I ever heard about flat packs, I think it was in the context of flat kill, which is an interesting way to get introduced to them. That's There's probably
Yeah.
better ways.
Yeah, I used to dislike Flatpak
Mm.
way before a couple of years ago. But after I started making some research and things like that. I realized that hey, like there's so many misinformation, and after that, I I started to study even more
Mm.
about it, and I realized that like we're actually trying to fix a lot of issues about the Linux desktop
Yeah.
that we desperately need.
Well, a lot of people when they see a project, they'll usually see it in the context of usually like a couple of years prior to where it's at, or at least a couple of months, because unless you're going directly to the source, you're trying to find the most updated information. The information that tends to propagate is the stuff that's been sort of out there for a while, whether it's flat packs when did have legitimate issues with the sandbox, and what they still do, but it's getting better over time. Whether it's snaps with their performance issues, which they still have, but they swapped over to LZ compression, and that helped out with that a bit. All of the stuff that people tend to talk about with anything out there, not just in the Linux space, but pretty much anything else out there, tends to be at least a little bit outdated, especially when you have a project like Flatpak, like FlatHub, like things like that, where they are trying to improve the user experience, improve the usefulness of these tools, fairly quickly from what I've seen.
Mhm. Yeah, it's especially it's like a X. We could say it's like a X Wayland.
Mm,
The only reason why Flatpak's permissions suck is because a lot of applications are they're very like legacy oriented, or
mm,
like they don't rely on XDG portals, and because of that, we have to we have to implement hacky workarounds.
mm.
This case being the like file system home or file system host and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I
Now
like.
that we're
Sorry.
yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say I understand why people are concerned about the use of file system. Oh, actually, why don't you just explain what the issue with file system home is before we go on from that?
Yeah, so like the issue is when you give it access to file system home, you're giving the application access, like read write access to the entire user directory.
Mhm.
So not entirely, but most of it.
Yep, yep.
Um, so for example, like Flaky.org, they do make a pretty um good point about Bash RC. So I do think it's over dramatic because distribution packages, they don't sandbox. There's no protection whatsoever when
Yep,
it
yep.
comes to running the application. At least Flatpak has something like that. You can use in third-party app called Flatseal to
Mhm.
manage those permissions. And like if you use the F1 key or you look at the source code, there's gonna have documentation
Mhm.
that explains these permissions, what they're for, and like how to use them as well.
Yep, yep. Well, yeah, I always find it very amusing when people bring up the issues with the Flatpak sandboxing, the Flatpak. Yeah, I guess sandboxing would be the correct term. And then say that Flatpaks are bad because of it, but what they are using instead doesn't have a sandbox in the first place. So it doesn't matter if the sandbox is leaky. Like, your solution in the first place didn't have any protections there. So, like, we're in the same position in the end, but only one of them is going to go towards a more secure solution. It is an issue, but it's also an issue that is being addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, um, with distribution packages, like you have to use a lot of backend utility like
Mhm.
AppArmor or well, not backend, but like mandatory access control like
Yeah.
AppArmor or other like backend utilities like Bubble Wrap.
Mhm.
Flatpak at least helps you like a lot manage these permissions.
I don't know if this is still the case, but I heard a while back that AppArmor doesn't really function properly outside of Ubuntu. I don't know if that was just people like misrepresenting it or what the deal was with that. I don't know if you have much experience with AppArmor particularly.
OpenSUSE is another distribution that uses AppArmor and they
Mhm.
use it really well. The only issue is like just like SE Linux or I guess Flatpak, if the distribution they ship an AppArmor
Mhm.
like that has no protection whatsoever, like Manjaro,
Yep.
um, then it's gonna be almost useless.
Yep.
The
Yep.
only
Yep.
reason why Manjaro has AppArmor is because of snaps, because snaps rely on AppArmor for sandboxing.
Right.
If we look at something like OpenSUSE or Ubuntu or even Debian, they have separate packages. They have more. They enforce more. They have more profiles for
Mhm.
enforcing.
Mm. So, well, actually, what led you towards flat packs instead of snaps? Because when you would have been, well, actually, when did you first get into flat packs?
That was a couple of years ago. Now it's been a while, so I don't remember exactly. I was
But yeah,
actually
definitely back then,
using.
snaps were pretty much had the because of canonical, pretty much had the main stranglehold on that segment of application distribution.
Yeah, and like I first started using Flatpaks,
Mhm.
ironically on Gentoo, and that's when I started liking it
Mhm.
because like I would run into a lot of issues with Gentoo, like for example, our circular dependencies, like where
Mm.
one dependency depends on the same dependency and things like that. It was a mess. And I saw that Flatpak was actually like, making it really, really easy. And I also realized that I could have like no like a full 64-bit system like without any 32-bit libraries
Yep. Yep.
and still have Flatpaks on top and run games like from Steam.
Yep.
I could have a very minimal base and still play my games and run a lot of applications and things like that.
Mhm.
That's when like I really started to understand the idea of Flatpaks, why they exist, and so forth. And the reason why I dislike snaps is because they really haven't addressed a lot of these issues
Mhm.
at all. Sure, they switched to LZ4, if I remember right, or LZO, I don't remember.
I want to say it's LZO. That sounds right to me.
Sure, right. Yeah, so they switched to LZO, and but there's still a massive performance hit, and
Mm.
there's been articles by Canonical themselves explaining that like hey, there's an issue. Like when they launch Firefox, it takes 6 seconds or something like that
Mm,
on a really recent on a like high performance computer,
mm.
which is like really bad. Whereas with Flatpaks, it's not really like that. There's no compression whatsoever, and it saves space by deduplication, which
Mm.
doesn't which there isn't any performance hit when you run them.
I don't know if this is just. I'm not sure what the cause of this is because I tend to notice that a lot of applications when I install them as a Flatpak do load like noticeably slower. I don't know if that's just some weird configuration issue with my system or what the deal is there, but I can say for a fact that at least on my configuration, I have noticed not as bad as snaps, definitely not as bad as snaps, but it's been it's been something where if the way I usually choose if I'm going to use an app is if it behaves properly, just as like a regular system package, a regular like from installed from Pacman. I'll usually go with that because generally I don't have those issues. But do you have any insight into what could possibly be causing that issue?
I would say XDG portals.
Hmm.
That's um now I'm really like I don't know much about XDG portals, how to troubleshoot them.
Mm.
I think if you use journal CTL, you might see some errors and things like that. But I would say that XGG portals are really fragile.
Hmm.
If something goes wrong, it can really like mess up your system or like degrade the experience.
Hmm.
Like at some point, XGG portals weren't even loading, and my themes weren't working. Application would take like as long as snaps. Essentially,
Yeah.
it was really bad. Um, But yeah, like, I would say that maybe it's XGG portals, but that's the only idea I have. Like, I don't know if like, since you do use a window manager, like maybe it might be caused by something like that by it.
Mm.
But it's weird because I did try Sway on
Hmm.
a virtual machine and it kind of ran fine.
Hmm.
So like, yeah, I never really had to troubleshoot um XGG portals, and I don't really have a lot of knowledge.
I have noticed. If you want a quick way to break XG portals, actually, just load up an X session, cancel out the X session, and go over to a Wayland session, and things just behave terrible. Like it's not just XG portals; a lot of things just behave really weirdly when you switch back and forth between those sessions without like cleaning up all the stuff that X has gone and said in the background. Whenever I have to like do a video on something in Wayland, I tend to just I don't want to deal with the cleanup, so I tend to just reboot my system and just boot straight into the sway session, just to be sure that everything's going to be good. Like especially things like Qt aren't very happy about swapping, but that's not a normal way to use your system. From just general user experience, I've noticed that portals actually make a lot of snaps, especially like the OBS snap on Wayland, actually usable. Obviously, that's partially due to Pipewire as well, but portals are this honestly how how Flatpaks existed earlier without portals also existing. I can't even imagine trying to use some applications back then.
Yeah, XGG portals are like the savior
Mhm.
when it comes to those stuff. But unfortunately, like even though it's like one of the coolest things, it also um it's also one of the biggest limitations
Mhm.
because like it's like your global key binding.
Mhm.
If if a portal doesn't exist, then like of shit, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and especially like there are a lot of niche cases where portals just will not be enough.
Mhm.
And at least like portals, they're really good for general use cases,
Yeah.
but like, especially like as I said before, I am a developer of bottles, and we've actually stumbled upon those limitations.
Mhm.
Um, at least like developers are starting to like work and address these problems,
Yep,
but still
yep.
like right now, there's a lot of limitations with portals.
You've definitely been how would you say it? Very vocal about the way that bottles should be I guess you might say bottled. Um because you have a lot of distributions from what I've seen that have like it happens with OBS as well. Whenever you have these like really complex applications, they will they will package them in a way where they mostly work, but it's not consistent in that way. And Bottle seems to be Bottle seems to be like the thing that is mainly brought up whenever we talk about packages just not being consistent across different distributions.
Yeah, that's because like bottles, since like we're using wine,
Hmm.
there's a lot of workaround, and not just that. Like, bottles right now we're using a release candidate version of libadwaita,
Hmm. Hmm.
which most distributions don't ship that. And like, yeah, obviously people will say it's our fault for shipping a alpha version of a library and things like that. At least with Flatpak, since everything is sandboxed and containerized,
Hmm.
um, we use that release candidate only for bottles, so it
Hmm.
doesn't affect any other like libadwaita application. And it's not just that, like we are also like it's a really fast paced, like we bring up features really quickly, we fix a lot of bugs really quickly, like every 2 weeks
Hmm.
there's a release, and there's always like a major feature or like a lot of bug fixes or UI improvements and things like that. And unfortunately distributions, they can't really catch up
Hmm.
to us, and that's why we decided to just abandon all additional packaging and went straight up for flat packs, because
Yep.
at least it let us continue in our own pace. We can push like thanks to like the release candidate version of libadwaita,
Hmm.
we were able to port bottles to GTK4 and libadwaita.
Hmm.
And if like we didn't port it, then we'd be delaying everything else along like yeah, we'd be delaying everything else as
Right.
well, especially like there are many applications now, like GNOME apps that use GTK4 and libadwaita.
Yep.
It'd be way behind now. And when we look at complex applications, especially something like GIMP, we're still porting over to GTK3, and that's a really like yeah, and that's a problem.
It
Like
is a problem, yeah. The GTA 3 version is it's mostly there. It's just GIMP is a massive project. It would be like, taking Blender or something like that and putting into new UI framework. Blender's got the resources to do it. GIMP, not so much. I can understand why it's taken. When did the GTK 2 version even come out? Like 10 years ago, something like that.
probably yeah. I didn't know GIMP much back then, so
Mm.
like oh, yeah. And that's like the problem. If like for something a massive project like GIMP,
Mm.
if they started porting to GTK3 way earlier, and they would have like been on GTK3 unstable like already, and probably even porting to GTK4.
Mm.
And like we've seen this, and we don't want to repeat the same problem, so we're like, you know what, fuck it, we're just gonna like use the actually at the time we used an alpha version of libadwaita,
Mm.
and we like updated to beta and then release candidate. And we didn't want to make the same mistake as GIMP, and we're like, yeah, screw it, we're just gonna like um or to libadwaita right now,
Mm.
abandon all the other like this packages
Mm.
and stick with Flatpak because they let us do that. And not just that, we can. It's not like theming, like distribution theming, where users will believe that the application is the problem when it's actually the theme. Like here, people will know that it's actually our fault. Like
Yep.
if we pushed an alpha version libadwaita, and we'd take all responsibility for that and actually like address these problems and things like that. So we were completely fine with maintaining with pushing or like porting to GTK4. And now like even then even then like we kind of finished,
Mm.
there's still a lot of issues with bottles on GTK4. Like it's still not mobile friendly. And I know like Wine doesn't work well on mobile, but at least like we're trying to future proof it. So then developers will start focusing on like Wine on mobile. At least like we'll have the UI, we'll have like a lot of things like already figured out. And there's still like some issues with mobile support with bottles, for example.
Mm.
And like we still need to fix these issues. But even then, like just imagine like the bad Weta 1.2, I think it recently got released. Imagine if we started porting right now, then we'd be like, like we'd be delaying all of these updates for like 2 more months.
Right. I've heard some people discuss. I know you've responded to some of these people, but people discuss like why don't you have like an AUR package, for example, and because like part of your issue is having these very recent packages. Why wouldn't AUR package not work in this case?
Because we're pushing, like we're using a release candidate, or before that we're using a an alpha and beta version of libadwaita.
Mhm.
If we like use an alpha version of libadwaita on from the AUR, this will apply to the whole system. This can affect all your libadwaita applications, and you can run into issues that only happen in libadwaita alpha and not on the stable version.
Mhm.
This is really unsafe, especially like Mirko, like the maintainer of bottles. Sorry, voice crack. The maintainer of bottles. He tested the AR package and it was really, really bad. Like it broke his system because it was using libadwaita Git,
Mhm.
and there are times and it just wouldn't build at all. Like this, like just one package, would cause a like maintenance burden for us. And at least with Flatpak, since everything is isolated, we can make sure that it doesn't break
Mhm.
anyone's system, and it will just break the application itself. Especially when like we make sure that we use XDG standards.
Mhm.
The only file system it has only directory it has access to, I believe, it's downloads folder, not even your home folder, nothing like that, because we make sure that it's like secure, and especially how those apps can be very like insecure and unsafe.
Mhm.
Well, at least it's sandbox by default, and we tell the user like if you want to open up the sandbox, that's you do it. We're not like it's not on us
Yep.
or
Yep. Yep.
Flatpak.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that for certain, I'm sure that part of the reason I come to this conclusion is because some issues can be addressed through having, say, like a application specific package. For example, with OBS on the AUR. So the main OBS package on like the Arch repos is terrible. Don't use it. Awful idea. But the one in the AUR, they package a separate version of I want to say it's CF minimal, and they install that alongside the version you'd have installed for like other applications that might need CF minimal. But I'm guessing that with something like libadwaita, it wouldn't really be viable to do that. You'd need to like do weird workarounds in the application to probably get it to function like you'd expect, not overriding your system libraries and things like that.
Exactly, and obviously like that can cause a lot of problems, and we just don't want to break users' computers
Mhm.
or well existing systems. There's also like I guess the opposite idea on Krita, for example.
Mm.
It's like it's a massive project. They rely on an older version of Qt5, and reason like if we look at the Flatpak manifest of Krita, they're
Mhm.
building an older version of Qt5 because that's where it works best. If they tried to use the newer, like the most recent version of Qt5, then they'd actually run into problems. And obviously, like if you use a distribution like Arch Linux, and like that's not gonna work well. Obviously, there are gonna be people who's like we're just gonna say that hey, like I used it from the AUR or whatever, and it works fine. Obviously, like if you're trying to do some basic stuff, it will work,
Mhm.
but will run into a lot of issues. Like if you're like, for example, a professional artist or you use like extensively
Yeah.
Krita. And
Mm.
it's not just that, like thanks to like for at least for bottles, like for using Flatpak entirely, we were able to like really like increase how, like add more and more like fun features and things
Right.
like that. And like each release, like a lot of people ask like on Reddit whatever, like, oh, how do these guys like have so much time? Well, it's not that we have a lot of time, is that we put the time developing the app itself and not on packaging or fixing distribution related
Right.
issues, or sorry, packaging.
I think this all sort of circles back into the idea that Tobias, what's the GNOME guy?
Bernard.
The theming guy.
Yeah,
What's his name?
Tobias Bernard.
That guy. Yes, Tobias Bernard. The thing that he brings up with theming, he doesn't care how an application is made. Like, if you want to make it to be a GTK app, if you want to make it to be a Qt app, doesn't really matter. What's important is getting the applications out there in the way the application was QA'd by the developers. If that is QA'd with this theme, if that is QA'd with this set of dependencies, that's going to be the best way to use the app. Not everything requires this. Like, a terminal, for example. Most terminals function generally how they should function as any sort of system package. Like, there are some edge cases, especially back when Python 3.10 came out, there was a lot of AUR packages that broke, for example. Like, things like this do happen, but generally with the simpler applications, you can get around. Like, they're not as touchy about, like, oh, do you have glibc version, let's just say 1.1 versus 1.11, for example. Like, a lot of applications aren't going to be that picky, but I think where Flatpak shine and where they make the most sense are with those applications that can be a bit flaky, like OBS, like Bottles, like Critter, for example. Like, a lot of these applications where they're very complex, and I can understand why, one, the devs don't want to be dealing with packaging issues, and two, why they just want to worry about a single package. Like, there's sort of like two benefits here. You don't have to worry about knowing how to package for all these distributions, and you don't need to test them as well. Just, you have this thing, it works, and that's all that matters, really.
Yeah, exactly, and it's quite consistent across distributions as well. So like even then, like even with that, there's still, like, even if we ignore that, there's still some benefits, like reproducibility, and also like what's the other one again? One of the biggest upsides of app images, I forget the name. Like, there's a specific word for that. Portable. They're very portable as well, and like the thing with Flatpak is because they ship with runtimes, like because like they really force runtimes users. That's why it's really, really gosh, I forgot the word again. What's the word I said again? I completely
Portable?
forgot. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I don't know why I just forgot this word. Like app images, it requires a glibc, and there's no like standards with app images. It's very much anarchy. Like, package it however you want. If
That's
the developer
a great way
wants,
to put it, to be honest.
yeah, honestly, I think it's a really, really bad approach, because a developer can ship like the app image with a library, or they can decide not to. If they decide not to, they have to like the app image has to assume that the distribution has that library.
Yeah.
And if they do ship it, well, they have to also like make sure that it doesn't use a lot of space as well. At least with Flatpak, there's deduplication going on, so that's a really, really big benefit here. And especially like another really nice benefit of Flatpak is, just like app images, you can install them in USBs or external drives and things like that. It's just that like to like app images credit, it's a lot easier to do that, because app images, like, you just have to drag and drop or just move the file, and that's it. The Flatpak, you have to type like Flatpak create -USB and do some things here and there. Then you have to install the application in that external drive or whatever it is. Like, there's more work, but the benefit you get in return is like a lot more, because it uses runtimes. You like it is like it is guaranteed that it's gonna work on the majority of distributions. So like even if you use Void Linux or Alpine Linux, it's still gonna run because the runtime ships libc. And that's a really, really nice thing. And that's also why like app images don't run on Void Linux, Muzzle, or like Alpine Linux because it depends on glibc.
Well, they also depend
Flatpak
on
is a lot.
libviews too, which a lot of
Yeah,
distros don't ship as well.
yeah, exactly that as well. And another really like something that no one talks about it is that Flatpak has its own macOS Rosetta thing going on as well.
Hmm.
Um, it uses QEMU to emulate architecture. So if you're using an ARM64 device, you can run x86 applications on it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I mean by it's really portable and a lot more portable than app images because it's cross architecture as well. And if I remember right, the recent version of a free desktop runtime started shipping RISC-V support as well. There's that as well.
Wow.
Yeah,
I had
it's a
no.
really cool.
Why is this not a thing that more people mention? I guess hardly anyone uses ARM, but even so, I'd never heard about this before.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's probably like Flatpak's fault because you don't have like
Yeah, did
really
they
bad
mention it on
documentation.
like anywhere?
Yeah, it's actually on Reddit. That's how I got to know it.
Oh no, I mean like any official distribution, like their website or anything like that.
No, I don't think so. Um,
If anyone who has development access on the Flatpak site is listening to this, please go and add that. That's a really cool feature.
yeah, and yeah, I think you were gonna say something.
No, I'm just baffled that it's not listed anywhere.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess like that's the thing. Like the Flatpak's like one of the biggest downsides is that its documentation.
Mm,
It like I've read the documentation and like it it's something. It's like your average open source documentation.
yeah,
It lacks a lot. And I'm trying to improve it, but it's just that like there's so many things don't understand, so I just asked.
right,
And recently I took a break, like and started like programming a bit. After that, I'm gonna start like um improving the docs as well.
I've talked about documentation a lot in the past. Like, the thing about documentation is no one likes doing documentation. Like, the reason why companies will hire people specifically for it is because none of the devs want to do it, none of the designers want to do it, nobody wants to do it. Like, they want to be working on the thing they want to be working on. If, like, it's
Exactly.
such an
And-
important thing, but especially especially because a lot of open source devs build something for themselves, and you can kind of get away with not having great documentation then. Like, oh, if I know how to use it doesn't matter, I've done this myself. There's plenty of programs I have out there that good luck working out how it works, but I know how to use it. But as you scale that up and as an app gets more and more popular, it doesn't work that way. Someone has to sit down at some point and eventually lay out how this is supposed to work.
yeah, exactly. And this is coming from someone who enjoys writing documentation.
Oh, good.
I
You're one of
hate
them.
writing documentation when it comes to my own projects. Because I just want to
Right.
work on it. Like as you said, I just want to work on it and like I don't care about documentation even though I really need to improve like sometimes. But yeah, like when it comes to other people's projects, I'm completely fine with
Mm.
writing documentation. But for my own projects, no, it's boring.
I think everybody can agree with that. Like,
Yeah.
I was gonna go somewhere from here. I had some sort of segue. I don't remember what I was gonna segue into. Something flat packs. Cool. You know what? We're gonna shift. I didn't ask you this earlier. How did you actually get into Linux, and when did that happen? And where did you start?
Yeah, that was in 2016.
Hmm.
That's when I first heard about Linux. I was just really curious and I tried Ubuntu.
Hmm.
And after a couple of Windows updates, it broke. And yeah, and like I was really like I was a noob, so I didn't know what was going on. And
Hmm.
just like anyone who is like who knows like has very little understanding, I would just blame on whatever is the result. So I would just
Hmm.
blame on Ubuntu and Linux, say that oh it sucks, it's unstable and things like that, even though the Windows update caused it. Um, and But after that, like at some point, I ran into a lot of instability issues with Windows,
Mhm.
and I got so sick and tired of constantly reinstalling that I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna install Linux and I'm gonna deal with everything like all its problems.
Mhm.
Um, to be honest, like I did like the meantime, well, not in the meantime, but later on, a job and I started doing like tech support.
Mhm.
And when I go back, like in 2016-ish, I think I think that the issue wasn't Linux, the issue wasn't Windows, it was actually me. Because I learned like after doing a lot of tech support, I learned that most issues come from users.
Right. Right.
And like and then now I'm just like of course I don't have like a fond memory of what happened exactly, but I I'm a bit skeptical now. I think that I was probably at fault. Even then, I'm glad of the results. I'm glad that I'm a Linux user now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like at some point, like when I tried Ubuntu again, I remember uh, calculator, calculator app was taking 10 seconds to load, and yeah, and it wasn't even following the theme, and like I didn't know about snaps back then, but the issue was
Oh.
actually snaps.
Right.
Yeah, and I heard about Pop OS, and so I'm like, I just switched to it. I'm like, wow, this is a lot better. And yeah, after that, like, I just wanted to learn more and more about Linux, and I started to like try Fedora. And, like, I just went to that distro hopping phase.
Right. Right.
Tried Fedora, Manjaro, horrible experience, but um, Arch Linux, then Gentoo. I even tried Xerbo a bit. Like, I tried many distributions and like that's how I gain a lot of my knowledge. It's by reading documentation and things like that. And after that, I tried NixOS
Mhm.
and I fell in love with it because like I started to understand like immutability and things like that. And that's when I also started using Flatpaks even more. And then I was like, okay, NixOS is a bit complicated to use and like, oh, I was like, no, okay, I want to try something a bit simpler. And that's when I stumbled upon Silverblue.
You went
And
full
so
circle. You started at Ubuntu. You went all the way down to Gentoo. Fuck this. Went straight back up.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, it's like at first you just want to learn, you just want to customize, and then you're like,
Mhm.
you know what? I want to have a life.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll
And
get that. If people ask me like how I have so much time to like spend customizing my setup, do all of this, I turn customizing into a job. Like that's the only way you can functionally do it. Don't try to like
yeah,
I totally get why someone wants to use Silverblue, someone wants to install Ubuntu, someone wants to use anything like Pop OS, like whatever they want to use. I get not wanting to waste all your time like customizing your setup. All you want to do is like, hey, I'm gonna fire up VS Code or whatever. I'm gonna do some coding and then I'm gonna watch some Netflix. And that's your day. And that's fine. The way I use Linux doesn't have to be for everyone. But, I've made it work.
mhm. Yeah, and even I went to this like very customization phase and all. Um, and like obviously I'm proud. Like I'm really happy that I did go through that phase because that's where I learned a lot about
Mm.
Linux, like not just the kernel but the overall desktop. Also started learning a lot of its issues as well, and I'm really glad. Like um yeah, like even though I went back to Silverblue, at least I kept a lot of the knowledge with me, and I think that's okay. And but yeah, like now I'm just sticking with Silverblue for now. And since I've been really, really interested with Fedora and how they lead the Linux desktop, like especially with them pushing Wayland really hard, um, like you see every distribution they're like, oh, we'll just stay with X11.
Mhm.
Fedora is like, no, we're going to full Wayland. If you have issues, well, sucks to be you. Go back to X11 type of thing.
Mm.
And yeah, like yeah, I know Fedora has its own issues, and especially like how they're pushing Wayland, and Wayland has a lot of issues. At least they're contributing upstream, like with Wayland, fixing a lot of issues and things like that. So like they're doing a lot on their part as well. And that's why like I was really, really interested in Fedora. They want to lead the Linux desktop. They
Mhm.
push the newest technologies and things like that. And it's thanks to them, like a lot of newer technology, like well, System D. it's not new anymore, but back then it was really new. ButterFS, Pipewire, like they were one of the first ones to push these, and
For
everyone
better
followed
or
up later
worse.
on. Yeah,
Maybe
and
in some cases, especially Pipewire, I think they did it a little bit too early. I
Mhm.
when I used Pipewire, I was using Pipewire before they initially started shipping it. It was a bit flaky back then. It was still like a very like there was a lot of cases where you'd get a new update and there would be a pretty big regression. Like the way that one thing I bring up every so often is so you know how in your audio mixer you have like your individual process volume and then your master volume.
yeah,
Yeah. So in OBS, if you capture your like audio interface, well, like your like the audio source, you capture like your system audio, that will always be at the same volume, regardless of what level you have it at. Like, regardless of what level you like change the processes to. In one version of Pipewire, that swapped around, so it used the process volume and ignored the master volume. So I had to like have things really loud for me, and I couldn't actually like hear anything else in my stream properly. That was when
oh yes.
initially went back to Pulse Audio. Since then, I think probably in the past, I want to say not long after OBS started working on Wayland, Pipewire I think has been like mostly good. I've had a few issues here and there, but besides that, like if there are distros that are still not shipping Pipewire, I think it's a much harder argument to make they should be doing that.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's like the thing with Fedora is they push things way too way sooner,
Mm,
and they kind of like, to be honest, like you have to do that like when you want to like
sure, sure.
um
Someone has to do it.
yeah, exactly, that's the thing. Especially with Wayland, like I think they started shipping Wayland in 2016 or 2017, if I remember the like sources.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously that's way too early. But of course, like someone has to push in, and at least Fedora, they're really big and they contribute to Upstream like a lot. And the fact that like even though they break a lot of like users, like, well, quote unquote break a lot of user system,
Mm-hmm.
at least we get those technologies a lot sooner than if Fedora wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you know what I mean.
No, I like what you're saying. I think a lot of people sort of forget about the fact they bring it up when it's convenient, but forget about the fact that Linux overall is this community effort. Sure, there are these corporate interests that are trying to push the desktop forward, but it's not like you just have one entity. Let's say you have like, let's say Red Hat was the only the only like company in the Linux space. It's not like they're the only ones who can do something, but someone has to put that stuff forward so that everybody can be like, hey, we can use this and let's see what's actually wrong with it. Let's contribute back to it and give, like, even if we can't code stuff, we can at least give our feedback on it, sort of explain the issues we're having, the different hardware configurations we have to bring things, eventually forward. It's going to take a while. It's not going to be like, hey, Wayland is perfectly ready. Everything is 100% next year. But I think it's much better to have someone slowly pushing the ball forward rather than sort of individuals choosing to go and use that software. Like look at Arkin for example. People keep bringing up Arkin to me. Nobody knows what that is because no distros ship it. So like it's not going to get better because it doesn't have that interest in it that any users actually trying it out.
And honestly, I never heard of that.
Yeah, I didn't think. There's a few people in the Discord who like to be like, "Hey, have you tried Arkin?" Like, no, no, I haven't tried Arkin. No one's tried
I've ne-
Arkin. I'll try Mia before I try Arkin.
Okay, so it's another like display
Yeah,
protocol.
yeah,
Okay, I see. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that.
yeah.
I
No
know
one has.
Mirror.
Mm.
But yeah, like even Flatpak, like technically they're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest,
I don't think anything's ever
like
ready in the Linux space though. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like even distribution packages, they were never ready or meant for for GUI applications. Have a lot of limitations and they have a lot of issues.
Mhm.
People just got used to it.
Mm-mm.
Just like many people like who have issues with like X11 screen tearing,
Mhm.
they just add the tear-free option, tear-free like flag or whatever it is, in the configuration,
Mhm.
and they call it a day. Like for them, that's fine, but obviously that's not something an average user like should actually suffer from. And that's the thing. Like it's just problems that many people ignore. They're
Mhm.
just really used to it, and they don't see it as a problem anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Um, have you actually messed around with the tear-free option, then compared it to like, Sway or something like that? Because at least for my GPU, tear-free is it. Okay, it works great on the desktop, but anything where I have a fluctuating frame rate, like I'm playing a game, for example, I get horrible stutters. Over on the Wayland side, it's smooth. Like it works like you'd expect a VSync solution to actually function.
Mhm. Yeah. Like I only used it once,
Mm,
and I remember like the only time is because like I was using Firefox
mm,
and it was screen tearing on Firefox.
right.
It was Yeah, so I just enabled tear free, but I wasn't really playing games at that time, so I probably never encountered any issues, or maybe I just got used to it.
So
But
what is sorry.
no, no, it's okay. Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, so what has your experience been on Silverblue? Like
Honestly, like
it's been a thing that a lot of people have been like talking to me about, saying, "Hey, try this out, try that." But like, what is like first hand experience? What's it been like?
it's okay. First, I'd say it has its own issues because
Sure.
Fedora has its own philosophical or yeah ideological issues.
Right.
Since they're very free software oriented, they don't want to push FlatHub because FlatHub contains a lot of proprietary apps.
Yeah.
They have their own Flatpak remote called Fedora Flatpaks, and
Mhm.
like I don't want to bash on Fedora like developers or like contributors, whatever. I think that's a horrible approach to push Fedora Flatpaks. It's a great idea
Mhm.
because um FlatHub and Fedora Flatpaks Fedora's Flatpak remote, they have different backends. So um GitHub they use OS3 to like OS3 is a backend utility, and you can think of Git for binary files.
Mm.
And yeah, so FlatHub uses OS3 to like redistribute and redistribute programs and things like that. Fedora Flatpaks they use OCI containers, which means like Docker containers. And again, as I said, it's a really cool idea, but because of Fedora's I guess very like free software oriented ideology,
Mhm.
um, we're kind of like they're ruining a bit the experience here. Because if they would push FlatHub, like Fedora would automatically have been a lot better.
I didn't know they
And
actually had their own thing. That I get it. Like it, I think the most important thing is user freedom. I know the free software guys like to talk about user freedom, but like if we're being honest right now, the user should be in a position where they can make that choice for themselves. Like that's actually user freedom there. Like I get it from software freedom, whatever, but yeah, I know I agree. Like it should be pushing FlatHub. It's not a bad thing to have their own thing. Like that's okay if you want to do that. You want to have things specifically catered for your system, but yeah,
think it,
it's weird.
yeah, I think like the fact that they're just pushing Fedora Flatpaks is a really bad thing
Hmm.
because there are times when both Fedora Flatpaks and FlatHub have the same application. For
Right.
example, GIMP. So like there's GIMP built by Fedora on the Fedora Flatpaks remote, but there's one from FlatHub which works a lot better. But then yeah, that's like another issue. Like when you open GNOME software, like And when you want to choose your sources, like Fedora Flatpaks, what the hell is that? Like,
I thought they were
and
just like
then the
taking the flat packs that fit theirs and then just put it on their own thing. That okay? No, I changed my mind. That's a stupid idea.
oh no, unfortunately they actually practice that stupid idea. That's exactly what they're doing with. They come with a filtered version of FlatHub that
Mhm.
has literally 7 apps. Out of 1,500 ish.
Right.
It's it's such a terrible approach. And like I don't know if they fixed it or not, but there was a time like I think like last release
Mhm.
of Fedora 35 where it would go under the name FlatHub. So when users like would try to install like GIMP
Yeah.
from FlatHub, they would be like, okay, that doesn't exist. But when they tried to add the FlatHub remote, it would say that the remote already exists. But again,
Oh.
like Fedora was using a filtered version of FlatHub, which has 7 apps, and this really misleads users.
Mhm.
And like that's one of the issues like I have with Silverblue and just with Fedora altogether. Another issue I have, it's not like for me personally,
Mhm.
it's for NVIDIA users. And like as I said, like Fedora, they're really free software oriented. So they try like they purposefully give a bad experience for NVIDIA users. Like
Mhm.
and like you have to add a third party repository and then you have to install NVIDIA drivers. Whereas on Pop! OS, like they come with NVIDIA drivers pre-installed
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
want to do that. I think that's the better approach. But again, like since Fedora, they're very free software oriented. Like they don't want this at all.
Use the
And
open source drivers. Use them. You know
yes,
you want to. You don't want to. No one
at
wants
least
to.
yeah, and at least like they made it like, recently they've made it a lot better. Like
Mhm.
where you can install the NVIDIA drivers completely via the GUI, like
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
GNOME software. That's a really nice approach. Unfortunately, most documentation online are outdated, and some documentation from Fedora have terrible search engine optimizations, so they're
Mhm.
like at the bottom of Google or perhaps even the second page. Oh, yeah, it's really bad. Yeah, yeah, it's really
Ah,
sad.
that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and there's also I remember actually no, actually like oh yeah. The third problem,
Mm.
Anaconda. Holy shit. Anaconda is like the worst installer I've ever used in my life.
Mhm.
Um like I mean, I don't want to rant too much because I don't like shitting on developers' work. I think that's a bit too rude. Like,
Okay. Well,
as a Fedora
why don't we
contributor,
talk about what's good about Silverblue then?
like, yeah. So it's the immutability. I
Mhm.
think that's a really nice thing, especially like they use OS3. As I said before, OS3 is a Git. It's basically Git or binary files, and I think it's a really nice like approach because they use a a package manager called well actually a hybrid package manager called rpm os3. So even though you install like even though like the system is immutable, you can still install rpms from rpm os3. And what it does is it generates an image and then you can boot and have the package installed.
Mm.
And another thing that I like a lot from Silverblue is like as I said before, they push newer technologies. And I like being that like edge where I can report issues. I can be like uh, report issues and like to help here and there and things like that. And right now I'm using Fedora 37, which comes with GNOME 43,
Mhm.
and I think that's in beta. It's not even stable yet. Um, so I can report issues to Fedora, and they can have a really stable more stable like upgrade and things like that.
Mhm.
And another thing that I like a lot about Silverblue is that they try to make it very user friendly at the same time. Like if we ignore Anaconda and Fedora Flatpaks, like they use a utility called Toolbox,
Mhm.
and Toolbox is like a little container utility for development, and it's really easy to use. Like you just have to type in toolbox enter, or actually I think it's at first it's toolbox create. It creates a Fedora container,
Mm.
completely immutable, and then you type in toolbox enter, and then you can install applications using DNF, which is like Fedora workstations, like the mutable distributions package manager.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when, like, at least in my opinion, like even if I use immutable desktop like Fedora workstation or even Arch Linux, I would still use Toolbox because I don't want to install development packages on my host system. I want it in a place where I can easily get rid of, and if something ever goes wrong. And I don't want to like deal with dependency hell and upgrade issues and things like that. Toolbox makes like really facilitates development
Mm-hmm.
because like it's a front end for for another utility called Podman, which is a drop-in replacement for Docker.
Yep. Yep.
Issue with Podman is that it's very technical. It's really it gets hard to use, just like Docker.
Yeah, I've not used
Obviously, you
Podman
can,
myself, but whenever I did anything with Docker, like there's a bunch of websites out there that have like the command to run to open an application, and it's usually like 100 or 200 characters long for anything remotely complex. It's like, how do I do this? What do I need to do? Like,
exactly, yeah, exactly. And Toolbox like it automates that.
mm,
And yeah, so when you type in Toolbox create, well, it pulls the right image. When you press when you type in Toolbox enter, it does like all the flags, everything like that.
yeah.
So you can use it. There's also an alternative to Toolbox. I think it's more popular. It's called Distrobox, and like I think Intel the name of their distribution, Clear Linux. I think they started using Distrobox,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a really popular program now. It's heavily inspired by Toolbox, but it's more powerful. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can create desktop entries within containers, so you don't have to install like the application on your host.
Mm-hmm.
Just install them on your container and launch them normally, like you would like any application or Flatpak, whatever. It also runs like it works with both Podman and Docker.
Yeah.
Whereas the Toolbox only runs on Podman.
I keep hearing about, like, I don't know what happened. I don't know if like some outlet picked it up and then everybody started talking about it, but I've been hearing so much about DistroBox recently. I really need to cover this at some point.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool utility. If I remember right, it's written entirely in a POSIX shell. If I remember right. Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah, it is. I'm looking at the GitHub right now, 100% shell. What the hell?
Yeah, it's seriously good. I believe Toolbox is written in Go. I might be wrong, but yeah, like I don't think it's a bad thing. But whatever it is, like DistroBox is in POSIX shell, and like it's really, really fast in development. And plus, like you can, I think there's like an installation script, so you don't even need a package on your system. You just have to install it using like a command.
Yeah, there's an install script you can just download from the. Oh, I don't. Please stop recommending this. They've got a curl installation method. I don't like. I don't like devs who include a curl installation method. There's also a Flatpak, which is experimental apparently.
Yeah, one of my friends worked on that, and then like the maintainer like of DistroBox, they liked it, and you know the took the Flatpak as well, and I don't know if he's gonna include it in FlatHub, but probably yeah.
Well,
And it would be cool if it does.
I've considered, like, the main reason I want to try this out is because I don't always want to fire up a VM just to try out something on whatever distro, like Ubuntu or Fedora or anything like that. If it can be achieved in a system like this, then it's probably it's going to be easier to do it like this for sure.
Like obviously it doesn't use as much resources as VMs. It's a lot easier to set up as well. and it uses a lot less space, and like there's just a lot of benefits of using Distrobox.
Mhm.
Even like if your distribution is mutable, there's still a lot of benefits, especially like the container part where like you can kill, like you can destroy your container. It won't affect your system because, well, like it's a container. You can just remove it afterwards and create a new one.
Well, even just simple things like, let's say you're on Ubuntu and there's something on Arch, like something on the AUI you want to be using. Like, just that alone seems like a good enough selling point.
Exactly. Or like maybe like the application you're running like from the AUR isn't working well, but it's officially supported on Ubuntu, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can get the Ubuntu container as well.
there's also that.
And like even better, like as I said before, you can also create desktop entries with
Mm.
DistroBox. Like there's literally a command for that, and it will just generate a desktop entry, and you can just like launch it from your application menu.
I don't, I don't. That's cool. I don't use an application menu like the way I run an application is I have my D menu. It lists out every binary on my system, and I just type in the name, which is great for me. But I get it if you're using like a desktop environment, for example. You want it to be in that application list and all that fun stuff. But I think
Yeah.
that's cool. I think it's cool it's there.
Mhm. Also about the curl thing, like,
Mm.
is there an alternative? That
Well, you can always just download the script and then run the script like that.
okay, that makes sense.
Like the method they have there is just the curl into sudo sh.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty insecure. Yeah.
Like I get it. It's just simple way to do it. I just personally would prefer to download the script and then do the sudo sh afterwards. That's the way that I like to do it. I get that people don't really think it's that big of a deal, and maybe you shouldn't just be downloading scripts if you think it's going to be insecure anyways. There's a lot of reasons why you might not consider this that big of a deal, but it rubs me the wrong way. Like, especially considering like you know, coming from using Windows and knowing how simple it is to just download random toolbars, for example. Like, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm encouraging that sort of reckless way of installing software.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like using sudo is not the best approach.
Hmm. But there's always the system packages there if you want to use those as well. There's a lot of ways to install this.
Yeah, and since it's just a bash script, it's like
But
really
yeah, you
easy
could
to
always just
package, and
download the repo if you wanted to.
yeah, exactly.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, yeah, and another thing I like a lot about Silverblue is that like it has really good GNOME software integration. I try to avoid the terminal as much as possible. Like
Hmm.
I know how to use it. I'm quite like confident with it. Just just for using GUIs.
Hmm.
And GNOME software, I think it like does a really good job at integrating RPM OS tree, and it updates all my applications automatically. I install applications using GNOME software, and well, to be honest, like since I'm mostly installing Flatpaks, like it's not really related to RPM OS tree itself. But when
Hmm.
it comes to updates, well, it uses RPM OS tree for that system updates.
Right, but it does list all the software out in the same place. Not like you need to go and use the GUI for this software and then the terminal for that software instead.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like Ubuntu where you have like 3 applications for updating apps.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's it's really something. And also like obviously like one of the things I really like about Silverblue is the immutability. Like it's the atomic updates. I really hated like when there are times like I don't know why. I think I have a faulty CPU or something, but there are times when my PC just crashes out of nowhere. Like it just locks out, and then it goes in a boot loop. So I have to force shut it down and then turn it back on. If I would use if I used a mutable desktop, or I mean, sorry, mutable distro,
Mhm.
and I upgrade it and it crashes midway, that would be a massive problem. Like, it would be a really big risk.
Mhm.
At least with atomic updates, like since it's either upgraded or it's not. There's no in between, like where it's in the process of upgrading. Like,
Well,
if you know what I
Silverblue
mean.
also maintains like a couple of prior versions as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, that's also one of the cool things about Silverblue is that you can just rebase to
Mm.
another version of Silverblue. Like you can upgrade, downgrade, whatever. Like, if I have a lot of problems with Fedora 37, I can just type in things RPM OS3 rebase Fedora colon and Fedora something 36. I would bring back to Fedora 36 from 37. Or if I want, I think there's like even Fedora in the 20s, like I don't know, 28. I could rebase to Fedora 28 if I wanted, and
If
then
you
go back to
for
Fedora.
some reason wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did 28 come out? Fedora.
Let me check.
Fedora. Whenever
German.
whenever it's like more than once a year release cycle, I have no idea when things came out. The end of life was in 2019, but when did it come out? I don't know. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. What I was saying was I
Actually,
like Ubuntu's way of naming stuff. This is when it came out. That's it. That's all you need to know. Just go.
yeah, I think that's a really nice approach as well. Um, yeah, right now I'm checking like the branches, like versions of Fedora. It goes all the way down to Fedora 37, which is really cool. But of course, like not a good idea to downgrade to 27.
20. You said 37 before. I was confused for a moment there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
27. My bad.
You can downgrade all the way to the beta version. Nothing more.
Yeah, whoops. And another really cool thing about like Silverblue, or actually just like OS3 in general, is that you can make your own, like you can custom. Actually, you made like a video about it.
I did briefly
Um,
mention I've not seen good documentation on how to do so. But I know there are some projects out there, and I think was it Oro in the Discord who kept saying about theirs? I think.
yeah,
Um, that's something I really want to look into. I completely cut you off there. Go on what you were saying. Swapping out images, things like that.
exactly. Like you can create your own images, and you can switch to it very quickly. If you have issues, well, you can swap back and things like that. And like whereas with mutable desktops, like if you want to downgrade, well, tough luck because glibc is a massive pain.
Mm.
And things like that. At least with Silverblue, since it's immutable, you're always getting a fresh like image or like fresh, guess fresh system,
Mm.
excluding your user directory, but like the root itself is really really clean.
Mm. Wait, I had a repo here that demonstrated it really well, but my history is not showing up in Brave right now. OS. Can I find it? Because there was a guy who took. Yeah, here we go. I mentioned this in the video. OS Tree Pity Workstation, which basically takes. It makes it its own image that has like sway and a bunch of other things like that on it, using like Toolbox and things like that for running other stuff. This is not at all like the way you would normally have Silverblue. You would have, GNOME, or if you're using how do you
Kinoid,
say the other one? Is it
Kinoid.
Kinoe? People believe me for the way I say it, because I've only ever seen it written out. But like
Yeah, same.
you can do things like this. You can ship Sway if you want to. You could take you could make an image and then use like DWM, have D menu, have the suckless terminal. You could make this really weird system that's nothing like the way that, Silverblue would be, and it just, you know, swaps right in, which I think is
Yeah.
actually really cool.
Yeah, and the best part is like it's not when you swap to Silverblue, for example, or you swap to something a lot more minimal. Like as I said, like you're gonna have a clean install, like
Mm.
or a clean system. Um, so there's that benefit as well because like if you use mutable distro and you uninstall GNOME, well, it's gonna leave out a lot of things, or you might even have problems with, oh, like this dependency depends on this dependency, which depends on this one, things like that. It's a massive pain if you want to remove a desktop environment.
Well,
At
it
least with
wouldn't be fully clean, would it? Because you have a lot. Unless the config files are handled differently, wouldn't the config files still be located in your home directory?
at yeah, that's why I meant like excluding user
Sure,
directory
sure, okay.
because like I was yeah, like I was talking about the system, like
Oh,
the
yeah,
root
yeah, okay.
partition, like
Yeah.
yeah, of course, like Plasma, I know they're notorious of like fucking up GTK because like if I remember right, when you install Plasma, it uses its own theme, its own GTK like Breeze theme, and when you switch GNOME, it will use like Plasma's cursor, then Breeze, and there's gonna have a lot of issues switching to GNOME.
Hmm.
Whereas when you switch from GNOME to Plasma, it's pretty like it's seamless. It's almost stock.
Right.
And there's like also another thing like I almost forgot to mention with Silverblue, um, is that they ship like a custom theme for Qt, and I think that's a really bad thing
Hmm.
because like they use another like platform like called Q GNOME platform. It's to make uh Qt applications look like GNOME or like look like
Oh,
Adwaita.
yeah.
Is since it's theming, well, it's bound to break a lot of applications, and I ran into a lot of issues with GNOME platform because like especially um yeah, like recently there's an ongoing merge request, like their Asma developers are adding console like the terminal app on FlatHub,
Right.
and since like QGNOME platform is its own theme, well, it actually messed up the whole application itself. Um, it looked horrible, and like I can show you a picture later on. It was really bad and literally unusable. And obviously, like if it's an average user who doesn't really understand how theming works, and they look at the Qt app and they're like, "What the hell? That's entirely broken." Well, they'll think that the problem is the application,
Hmm.
and in reality, the issue is theme itself. I think that the fact they're using QGNOME platform is a really bad approach. And I know um like if you use Qt on Wayland, it it uses its own CSDs,
Hmm.
which doesn't integrate with GNOME. So I can see why they took that approach. Like by they I mean Fedora.
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that they're using their styling to Adwaita instead of just replacing the title bar. Yeah, like
I I get it. I get the idea of wanting a uniform desktop. But unless unless you're going to be putting in that QA effort to make sure that everything that is available is working like it should, it's probably not the best idea to be doing. And, no distro is going to be doing that effort. They just don't have the resources to really divert into that. So it's probably better just to not do it.
exactly. And that's like even if they do have the QA like resources to
Mm.
test, well, there will always be edge cases,
That,
uh,
yeah.
and that's like also a problem. And the website Stop Theming My App, right?
Yes.
That's exactly like GNOME's like Tobias Bernard's points.
Mhm.
Like stop like let users break our apps however they want, but like distros stop fucking up our apps. Like
Mhm.
you're giving users a bad impression, but our own applications when we're just trying to like give the best user experience.
Mhm.
And the fact that Fedora is using QGNOME platform is, in my opinion, not really a good approach. It's not really a good thing either when it comes to theming.
I think what was I gonna say here? Shit. What was I gonna say? Um, it's like 9:30 in the morning. Why am I or 9:50 in the morning? Why am I already struggling to think stuff? Um, GNOME theming. something.
Libadwaita?
Libad something. Oh fuck, what was it? Something about Libadwaita.
TK?
GTK. I don't remember.
Libhandy?
I I don't remember what I was gonna talk about. Shit. Um. Edge cases. GNOME. Oh shit. There we go. Well, yeah. I think if we're gonna be dealing with this QA on the distro side, it's probably better rather than trying to QA, you know, specific setups that distro is going to be doing, helping out with the upstream. Because maybe if, like, maybe if you actually help out with the upstream, there'll be some consideration about, you know, bringing it in more in line with the way your desktop looks. Like if you're going to be shipping, like maybe if you do help out with upstream, that you could actually get into a position where the devs are aware of what you're trying to do on your platform and are willing to help out. Maybe they won't be, but it's probably better to do that than. That's what I was gonna say. That was me bullshitting for a minute. I got there now. Users don't care. Like, users don't see and don't care about the distro when they install an app. What they see and what they care about is they see the app. And if the
Mhm.
app is behaving weirdly, it doesn't matter to the user if that's a problem because of the distro. They're going to see the app is broken, therefore it logically is the app's fault. It's,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter what the distro's done. Like this is like what I talked about in today's video. So there, like 12 years ago, best way to stream Netflix on. Oh, this is a
Oh yeah.
massive way. Best way to stream Netflix on Linux was emulating a Wii. And when someone sees Linux from the outside, they're gonna see Linux is bad. They're not gonna say, "Oh, the problem here is Netflix." It's a website. Websites should work on Linux. You have a web browser. Clearly, the problem is the thing that seems most obviously to be the problem, even if it's really something completely different.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just that, like, a lot of the time they will just open issues or contact upstream developers, and upstreams are just gonna be like, what the fuck, that's your distro's problem, go contact them. And if I remember right, I think Canonical is actually contributes to GNOME, like libadwaita and things like that. Which is really surprising. And if they are, like, good for them, because it's nice to see Canonical actually contributing to like upstream developers. If we look at other like in another side, like System 76, like, I respect Pop OS. I don't really like System 76 because they're really, really like aggressive towards upstream developers. They're just gonna be like, oh yeah, but like the issue is your style sheet, or like you guys, like, we want to merge, like we want to give you this code and you guys don't want to merge it. Well, style sheets are extremely like complicated to maintain. And if System 76 wants to like integrate their own style sheet in like GTK or whatever, and you're asking them, like the GTK developers, to maintain a lot of CSS, like a lot of stuff, and that's obviously a really, really big problem because yeah, I think the GTK developer is getting paid, but obviously like he has a limit as well.
Sure.
He can't maintain every single thing in the world either. So that's like libadwaita was out, so like distributions can properly brand applications without actually breaking them. And if I remember right, like a good, like as you suggested before, like distributions or developers, whatever, like companies, they should be working with upstream. It's exactly what Red Hat and Purism have been doing for a long time.
I don't know how you managed to bring something useful out of that ranting. I'm impressed.
Sorry?
I don't know how you managed to like bring something useful out of my my segue rant and actually like turn that into like a useful point. I'm impressed with that.
Yeah, it's because like I always talk about this to people like who don't understand how this stuff work,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's still many people who like link stop theming my app and
Mm-hmm.
they like miss the entire point of libadwaita. So like I have to explain them like they're 5 years old, like
Yeah,
how
that's
it
fair.
works and things like that. Yeah, like
Well,
Purism and Red Hat like are one of the like few companies that actually work directly upstream.
mm-hmm.
Libadwaita is maintained by Purism as far as I know, and the idea was also suggested by Purism. And we can see like thanks to Purism, like and their work to upstream, how much like GNOME apps have improved a lot, like performance wise,
Mm-hmm.
um, even consistency, and well, now we're going to see things like recoloring API, like where you can recolor a lot of aspects of. Actually, I think everything about GTK and libadwaita, and yeah, that's a really really nice thing, and I hope System 76 they start doing that as well. They start contributing to GNOME upstream instead of calling a 2016 canonical and creating their own desktop environment that will likely fail later on. At least
Good luck with that because they're already doing that. They
I
work.
know, I
They're
know.
working. Someone I didn't know they actually had something set up for Wayland, but someone posted in the Discord yesterday. They are. They're fully committed to taking this path.
Which I mean, I respect that.
Mm.
The issue is like System 76. I believe they are a lot smaller than what canonical was back then, and like if they have to maintain because like maintaining a desktop environment is really really difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and GNOME developers like they continuously have to like make a lot of compromises. They have to like remove features because like and you can see like GNOME they went in that phase where they removed like they kept removing each and every feature. Um but the like important thing is that they're actually re-adding them again but properly implemented
Mm-hmm.
because well it's difficult to maintain legacy code in a very very like core like um, in a desktop environment.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up like Windows, where apps look at Windows 7, some apps look at Windows 10, some like Windows XP and things like that. If they keep maintaining legacy code, well, they'll have to make a lot of compromises. And so, like, yeah, like libadwaita, even though it's limiting in a lot of places, it brings a lot of things, like a lot of benefits as well.
I think getting away from that legacy code is also a big drive behind the push towards Wayland as well. Like, my favorite example about Xorg legacy code is there's a print server, like in Xorg, like to print
And
not print to a screen, like generically print to things, a screen, a printer. Why is this here? Why do we need it?
if I remember right, they actually got rid of that code.
Oh,
Like
they did.
the whole.
Okay, my example's outdated.
But true, but like your point is still stands. Like they still have a lot of legacy
Yeah, well, yeah.
stuff, and
There's other examples out there. This was just my
yeah,
my personal pet example.
yeah. There was a video like about like the history of X11, Xorg, and Wayland. It's like an hour and 30 minutes long, and I remember like I might be misremembering, but at some point they do say like they removed the printing server like part, which was like 200,000 lines of code or something like that. Like fucking really crazy. Yeah, like yeah, like GNOME, a lot of the stuff they did, like they started from scratch, and I think
Mhm.
that's a really good thing. Um, that's exactly what Wayland did, and obviously, like there is gonna have a lot of issues with that, and we've seen that there are a lot of issues. But as a long term, like there are a lot of benefits to it.
Mhm. Well, one thing that really annoys me about the anti Wayland crowd is like the idea that Wayland is gonna be ready next year. It's gonna be ready 2 years from now. Like, oh, Wayland came out. Wayland's been around for like what 10 years? It's been around for quite a
Yeah,
while. probably longer than 10 years at this point. Whenever Wayland first came, it's been around for a while, but we need, like, a lot of people remember X386 being a thing, so I think that Xorg sort of came about. When was the swap? 2007, something like that. X386, it's not that old, so people think that the swap over to Xorg, it only took that long to Xorg to the state that it's in now. But Xorg is a continuation of a bunch of projects for like 30 or 40 years. 2008 is when X386 stopped. Yeah, so Xorg looks like it's this really young project, but it's really this like 40-plus-year-old legacy codebase. And obviously, Wayland hasn't had that dev time yet. Like, it's gonna take maybe another 5 or so years to get Wayland to that point where it's basically perfect. And this isn't just a Wayland problem, this is also a developer support issue. Like, the remote desktop stuff, for example. Like, that's not just a Wayland problem to address, that is also developers writing software and updating their software to use any solutions that might come out onto the Wayland side. But I think that I was using Sway all yesterday. I actually forgot I was on Sway until I looked at my my header bar and I realized it was different from my regular ones. Like, oh shit, this has just been good all day. Like, it most the core Wayland composers, like the Sways, Rivers, Gnome, KDs, things like that, they're mostly good enough. They're not perfect, but they are mostly good enough. And that, I think, is much more than could be said when Fedora started shipping Wayland back in 2016.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think in 2016 was also when GNOME, that's when they started pushing Wayland really hard.
Mm-hmm.
As it's still really important that we do push these technologies. And if no one pushes it, it never gets mature.
Yeah.
It's even I think SteamOS doesn't use Wayland by default. But I know that they use Flatpak and FlatHub by default, and that's a really, really nice thing, to push Flatpak's adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are many applications that still need to update their toolkit or framework, like Discord.
Discord.
Yeah, it's is a really, really big problem.
To be fair, in Discord's case, they barely have screen capture working, so they're never gonna update that.
Yeah. They just care about Nitro at this point.
Yeah. Well, they care about Windows and mobile. That's mostly mobile.
I don't know. I mean, they did change, completely change the mobile experience. So at this point, I don't even know what
they definitely care about Linux. That's what we can say for a fact.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with other applications. There are many applications who they're just oh, we have a Linux build, and they don't care about it anymore.
DaVinci Resolve.
Zoom.
Yeah. Well, no one cares about Zoom at this point. So they had that 2-year period to really build up Zoom, make it good, and then people start going back to work, people start going back to school. Well, the money's gone now. What do we do? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, good for them. They're really sketchy anyway.
Well, yeah, end-to-end encryption, except the middle's not encrypted. So, yeah.
Yeah.
End-to-end. Both ends are encrypted. They weren't technically lying. It was just a middleman, and I don't know what they're doing with the data, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows?
And I do kind of wish that during that period, tools that why am I blanking on the really popular open source video conferencing tool?
Meet.
Sorry.
Jitsi Meet.
Yeah, Jitsi Meet. Yes, yes. I kind of wish that tools like that did sort of gain some sort of traction, but they went to the easiest solution. That solution was Zoom. That solution was Cisco WebEx. That solution was Google has a offering that I'm forgetting the name of. Google Meet sounds right.
Yeah, I think like one of the if I remember right, Zoom has a couple of features that Jitsi Meet doesn't have,
Yeah.
and oh, like there's that issue as well. But yeah, like I really wish that people like would actually would have used Jitsi Meet instead
Mhm.
of Zoom.
Look, if we have to choose between terrible proprietary solutions, I'd prefer Zoom over Cisco WebEx. I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's not a good solution. It basically it takes everything that's good with Zoom, gets rid of it, and just focuses on the bad stuff. It's just like
Ah, I see.
it
It's like
works, but
Manjaro.
like you don't want to use it. Plus the pain in the
Yeah.
ass to log into it and whole other array of issues.
Yeah, I never used it. It's my first time hearing about it, but
Mhm.
yeah, I guess I can like not consider using that
It,
ever in my life.
it's mainly for like the serious corporate business people because it's Cisco. You've probably got
Uh,
1,000 Cisco routers throughout your office and Cisco access points. Like you know the name Cisco, so you keep using Cisco. That's pretty much it.
yeah, that makes sense. Just branding.
Mm. We were talking about Red Hat and their like how much effort they put into improving the desktop. I think there's a lot of people that don't like systemd, for example, and don't like Red Hat, but don't realize how much of the desktop actually is Red Hat.
Yep.
Even if not
And
directly Red Hat, like heavily funded or started from Red Hat developers.
yeah. Um and what I like a lot about Red Hat is that like the employees,
Mhm.
they're just like Fedora like contributors or like the fan base. They're very free software oriented.
Yep.
In case you didn't know, they're very anti CLA. Like they're against CLAs, and they even have their own like anti CLA movement because they know the risk of like they know how much of a risk it is like for open source projects to like with CLAs,
Mhm.
and instead they adopted DCO, like the I forget what it means, but whatever Linux uses. Um,
Developer Certificate of Origin.
yeah, something like that, or probably that. Because like they actually do care about free software, and obviously like they do care about their own benefits as well, because like you need profit after all.
Mhm.
But one thing that I really really like about Red Hat is that they want their things to be community driven. SysMD, it's very like actually not SysMD, Fedora.
Mhm.
It's very it's a well, I was gonna say company. It's actually like politically independent from Red Hat.
Mhm.
If like Fedora, like if the contributors, if they wanted, like you could choose something that would go against Red Hat. Like for example, like Red Hat XFS is
Mhm.
developed by Red Hat, but Fedora they use ButterFS and not XFS. Like that's one of the things. And well, if the community wants, they could choose something that is not even developed by Red Hat at all, and whatever it is, like what I'm trying to say is like it's not Red Hat that decides what they do with Fedora,
Mhm.
but a lot of the things they do, it's mostly like infrastructure, like wiki. That's where Red Hat comes in,
Yep.
like
Yep.
bug tracker and things like that. It's it's the same thing with Flatpak. Like
Mhm.
Flatpak was started by a Red Hat developer, but it's very much community driven as
Mhm.
well, because it's not just Red Hat that is involved. There's GNOME that is involved, KDE, um, Labra, Purism, Endless, many like organizations or foundations that are
Mhm.
really involved in Flatpak development. Same thing with systemd. Um, it's not just by Red Hat. Well, now now it's Microsoft as well. Um, but yeah, like it was. Well, now it's Microsoft, Red Hat. There's, if I remember right, there was also Intel involved
Mm,
in systemd, and there was also a couple of Debian members of Debian who were involved in systemd and actually members of the systemd project.
mhm,
Because like it's not just Red Hat that um that controls. Well, actually, they don't really control it. They just employ someone to work on it.
sure.
There are also like other members who like vote or whatever it is. Even with GNOME, like GNOME isn't really a Red Hat project at all. But people say it's company driven. I completely disagree with that. I think it's very community driven. It's it's just like they do lack individual developers a bit. But
Mm,
if I want like see like Red Hat could employ me to work on GNOME, and a couple of months later, like, I can apply to be a GNOME Foundation member, and they will accept me because well, I contributed to GNOME, and I've showed that look, I put work on GNOME.
right.
If I was an individual developer, like unaffiliated with like any company, and I would contribute to GNOME, and I would apply for a membership, well, they would still accept me for that.
Mhm.
Um, and after that, I can vote. I can start maintaining software and things like that. Um, only issue is like if you see that GNOME is too corporate, well, you might as well try to like start a bit contributing to GNOME. When you become a member, like you can have your say. You can voice your opinion and say like, oh, we should probably focus a bit more on the community side and things like that. Um,
I think
yeah,
the two corporate things kind of amusing. Like there's a lot of Red Hat employees that work on this. There's a lot of there's a lot of the reason why there's a lot of Red Hat employees that work on a project like that is because Red Hat hires a lot of people and they hire a lot of good developers. So like
yeah,
and they hire people to work on projects. Like it's not like they're just making this money and then going and buying mega yachts. Like they're putting money into the projects you want to see improve. I think a lot of people romanticize this idea of completely free of corporate money, completely community driven. Nobody is like getting any money to do any of this work. It's just doing it for the joy of the code and doing it because free software is the morally good thing. But people have to pay their rent. And if a
yeah.
company like Red Hat has a model to make money make money from corporate customers and bring money into this space, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. It can be a bad thing in certain cases where where developers say like a single entity gets a lot of control and then pushes other people out. But that doesn't seem to be the way that Red Hat and Red Hat employees are managing any of these projects.
Yeah, and also a lot of the projects they work on, it's like that as well. Um, like GNOME, as I said, there's a couple of companies and organizations that contribute to GNOME, like Purism
Mhm.
maintains libadwaita. GTK is maintained by the GNOME Foundation. And then there are some applications like GNOME Boxes that is
Mhm.
maintained by Red Hat. And if I remember right, WebKit GTK, like the engine, is maintained by a company called Igalia. If I remember right, I might be
Mhm.
wrong, but we can see like our companies work on different aspects, and it's not like one company can just abuse it, because if they do abuse it, they're going to like affect other companies as well, like that work on a GNOME, and plus like the other members who are like independent. There's gonna have a lot of issues. So even then, like Red Hat can't like or any company can't really abuse
Mhm.
inside GNOME.
I think one thing to make clear there though is these projects do like GNOME has the way they want they've got their vision for the project. That's what I'm trying to say. They've got the goals they're trying to achieve. They've got their vision for the project. And even I think that's separate from Red Hat being involved because GNOME, for example, is very hard on the CSD side, for example, and doesn't really care about SSD. That's
Yeah.
part of the GNOME vision, and even if that doesn't align with other projects, and people try to contribute things into the project, and they're not really receptive to this, that's not necessarily a bad thing on the project's front. What you're trying to do doesn't align with what they're trying to achieve, if that makes any sense.
Um, like you mean like it affects other desktops and things like that?
What I'm trying to say is, like, the GNOME project has its vision, and even if people
Yeah.
try to contribute things in, if that doesn't necessarily align with that vision, it's not them trying to keep you out. It's more like what you're trying to do doesn't really fit with what they are trying to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of the time there's like more than just contributing. There's a lot of backlashing. Like a lot of the time, potential contributors will just demand,
Hmm.
and that's like I think that happened like this often happens actually, and like I often look at the issue trackers.
Hmm.
I I often see people just demanding GNOME to do like whatever the user wants, and like obviously like who the fuck are you? Like you're not contributing to my like. Oh, yeah, maybe you submitted this merge request, but like even then you didn't say it in a nice way.
Hmm.
There's nothing respectful about it. Like why should we respect you? Like the way like why should we merge your like merge request, or why should we like honor your opinion and things like that?
Hmm.
Um, like I've had a really good like experience with GNOME developers because like I've been forming like I'm formulating my sentences like in a way that's like how can I say this like wording is key
Sure.
basically.
Yes.
So you have to explain why that approach is better or whatever it is like, or why their approach is bad.
Hmm.
Like it goes against like doesn't really align well with their vision. Like for example, I opened an issue on GNOME Software's like issue tracker, and like Flatpak with Flatpak there are extensions. So like when you install OBS Studio, there are a couple of plugins you can install like
Right.
extensions. Um, GNOME Software right now like they list those extensions really well, but before that they used to have a bit of problems. For example, like you know Viki Basalt, do you know actually Mango HUD?
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
like a lot of people know that. Um, so Mango HUD is part like it's the free desktop runtime extension, and the problem is like if you wanted to install Mango HUD, the Mango HUD extension on from GNOME Software, it
Hmm.
would be pretty difficult. Like would you would go to the runtime like entry, and then you would install Mango HUD, and that's really difficult because if you try to like just type in Mango HUD, nothing would appear. I opened an issue and I said like, oh, like these, in my opinion, like extensions should show up when you're searching, and I explained why, like why that's really like they should do that. Obviously, like they considered my issue and they literally implemented it next day.
Hmm.
And that's the same thing. Like you need to word properly. Like if I go on BD's like issue tracker and I start saying like, oh, do it like GNOME, they're just gonna be like, what? No.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. With the KDE people, they are very touchy about anyone acknowledging the fact their desktop looks like Windows. They really don't like it when people say. I know that, you know, they have their own designers, and they have their own design principles, and they got to this design in a very different way, but I think everybody can kind of acknowledge that the KDE kind of looks like Windows. And that's not a bad thing. But it's also,
Personally,
when you're submitting an issue, it's probably not the best place to bring that up either.
yeah. Personally, if people say that it looks just like Windows,
Mhm.
I'd take it a compliment because I think that Windows like they put a lot of work with UI,
Mhm.
especially Windows 11. It's really consistent. It looks really good. Obviously, I'm
It
not gonna
looks
be using
good.
Windows any. Yeah,
I've heard other things about its issues with it, but it looks good. I'll give it that.
yeah. Like Windows issue is more about the legacy stuff, like
Mm,
for apps that look like Windows 7. If we just focus on the Windows 11 like UI, like
mm,
the settings app or Windows Store app, those look amazing. Like they're really modern. They have a lot of effects. They have a lot of animation. They look really good. And like that's like yeah. If you say that Windows is bad, that's whatever. Like I think that Windows has improved a lot in the
mm,
recent years. And what we should like on the Linux desktop and mobile, what we should do, like we should only take the good aspects of Windows and
mm,
implement them and leave out the bad. Like for example, Fedora, they have offline updates.
mm.
That's a really good thing, like from a safety like point of view, because like everything is done offline and there's a lot more safety and stability. Obviously, people will just say like, "Oh, that's bad because it's just like Windows," but that's actually a good thing about Windows, and like, we actually need proper updates on Linux, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, no, it. I think when it comes to Windows, when it comes to macOS, a lot of people are very touchy about anything, anything that could possibly be turning their favorite their favorite Linux distro into something they don't like. But the nice thing about having this project here is you can pick and choose the things that you like. Um, and like
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just pick and choose what you like, and if you don't need to have a Windows update system, for example, like that doesn't need to be a thing that forces your system to reboot. Like you don't need to have that. Like that doesn't just because Windows also has that doesn't mean that um I don't know, the way that like registry edit, for example, is an incredibly useful utility. Like
Mhm.
that is a great thing that Windows has. Like all of these system settings are in one place. Obviously,
Mhm.
it'd be a lot more difficult to do on something like Linux, but that's a great part of Windows. But
Yeah.
having that doesn't also inherently mean the bad stuff as well.
Exactly. And like GNOME,
Mm,
like people shit on GNOME a lot, but they really try, like they try really hard to only
mm,
pick the good stuff of numerous like operating systems.
yeah.
Like you'll just hear many people say, "Oh, GNOME is a budget Mac OS." Believe me, I've used Mac OS full time during work. Let me tell you right now, like it's nowhere close to Mac OS. I feel like it's an upgraded version of Mac OS
Mm,
because it's it follows some like UX standards. Mac OS, you cannot snap like you cannot drag your mouse to to snap oh my god, I can't speak. You can't drag to snap windows on Mac OS.
wait, you still can't do that?
No, not by default. You need a third
Uh,
party
what?
application for that. Yeah,
What?
it's
Windows
so
had this
what?
since 8, didn't it? How's
Sorry.
Mac still not have it? Or is
Yeah,
it?
I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. I guess it's just their think different bullshit they
I
like
yeah
simping on.
yeah.
Uh, so what you have to do instead, you have to press and hold the full screen button.
Uh huh.
And then it asks you like, oh, snap to the left, snap to the right. That's such like that's
What?
so non-standard.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really, in my opinion, it's really bad.
Mm.
Um, and like I saw a lot of inconsistency issues as well. Like for example, if you double click the top bar,
Mm.
it actually behaves differently. Like depending on the application. If you use what's it called if you use Finder like the file manager,
Yeah.
when you double click at the top bar, it does nothing. But when you double click on Chrome, it maximizes the window. It's and then there's some like applications where like Safari,
Mm.
when you double click the top bar, it expands it to like 2/3 of the window. It's super weird. Like I don't understand. Like there's so many issues with Mac OS. That's it's not. It's really sad. And one, I'm not too sure if GNOME got inspired by like macOS's mission control.
Mm-hmm.
You know GNOME's overview, right?
Overview. What do you
Uh,
mean?
can I share my screen? Is
Uh,
that
I don't have it set up right now to capture your screen.
rip? Okay.
Just
Let me.
if I look at it, can I find it?
I'm just gonna send
Oh
a
yeah, that'll help.
screenshot.
I probably know what
Hold
you're talking
on.
about. I just don't know the specifically what you mean.
Hold on.
Uh,
I'll just send it on Discord.
okay, yeah, that's all good.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that, yeah.
that's the overview.
Right. Yeah, okay,
So,
yeah.
so this like macOS, they have their own thing called mission control, and it's really like it's a similar concept.
Mhm.
The difference is that GNOME makes it. They do that a million times better. Um, like one of the things I really like about GNOME is that he um follow web standards.
Mhm.
Um, well, like if you look at many websites, everything is like I'm at the middle of the of this display, right? Like
Yeah.
there's some maximum width. GNOME does that as well. So like if I open my hold on, let me show you. Um, I'm just if I open the application menu, you can see how everything is centered, right?
Sure.
And on Mac OS, like they spread everything everywhere, and that's like not really good. Like it's not really a good experience
Mhm.
when it comes to like eye travel because this causes eye fatigue. GNOME, since they're putting everything to the center of the display, even if you use an ultra wide display, it's still gonna put everything to the center of the screen,
Mhm.
and like it reduces a lot of eye travel, and which means like you can stay on your computer for a much longer period of time. It's coming from someone who like uses computer like for 4 or 5 hours without any breaks or anything like that. And I'm still not tired when I use GNOME because like they, they do many things right
Mhm.
when it comes to UI. Um, yeah, like about the rent and all that. Like there are many things where have you seen the new quick settings from GNOME?
I don't. There's a lot of stuff the GNOME's doing that it has not crossed my path.
Okay, that's fine. Let me just send another
GNOME quick
picture.
settings. I think I might be able to find it. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that like I don't know
Yeah.
if you show it in your stream,
Yeah, I'm
but
showing it
that's
now.
like Android. Like yeah, that's like Android.
Yeah.
Like
It's
the
nice.
newer Android 13. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they take the good stuff from other operating systems and they put them into one environment.
Mhm.
You don't try to like follow the bad stuff. And yeah,
Mm.
I know there are some exceptions, like removing system tray. I think that's a massive like that was a massive problem, and especially like many users actually depend on system trays. But this also brings to the same issue as I said before, like you have to keep up legacy code, and then you have
Mhm.
to work around all of these issues. Then you have to maintain, you have to support, you have to port over to each and every single version of GNOME. In that case, they're like, you know what? Let's just get rid of the code, and like the community deals with that, like using extensions.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, it's better like when passionate people maintain those type of software than
Mhm.
people who are not really passionate. You understand?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and like yeah, I do agree that system tray was a like
System trays are pretty useful. I like system trays.
yeah, personally I hate system trays,
Mhm.
but we're like at the end like we're trying to focus on the average person, and removing system tray isn't really a good like approach to that. At least we're creating a new
Mhm.
protocol for system trays because like one of the problems they had with older versions of uh but like with current implementations of system trays is that they're very legacy, they're not sandbox friendly, they don't work well a lot of the time,
Mhm.
and like there are issues here and there and things like that. At least the fact that they're fixing that after 10 freaking years, at least that's a good step. But even then, like that's, at least in my opinion, it wasn't that much of a good decision. So I hope there's a lot of long-term benefits to that. Yeah, like I think that a lot of the time, GNOME, they do a really good job when it comes to taking the good side of like the good UI
Hmm.
from different operating systems. And yeah, I know that you're not a fan of header bars at all. But
That's that. Okay, my issue with header bars is when you stick use. Um, I don't think the only way to access some functionality in an application should be in the header bar. Like, if you're gonna have something in the header bar, fine, but have some other way to access it, because there are a lot of desktops that don't show the header bars or will hide the header bars in full screen. Like, if you're gonna have, like, don't have all of the buttons in your application inside of a hamburger menu that's going to be hidden when I go full screen. Like, that's all I have to say. Put it in a context menu. Do anything else. Like, give some sort of option, or if you are on one of those desktops, then have it show in another way so it doesn't end up breaking the application. I've seen so many programs which do not function in full screen on my setup. Like, that's the issue I have. If you want to do it on GNOME, be my guest. That's fine.
but yeah, like, and that's like, I guess that's one of the, like, I mean, I don't really have an issue with that, but
Mm,
like I understand why a lot of people are against that. It's like GNOME, they only focus on GNOME. That's it.
mm,
Like if you have issues on another desktop, they're just gonna like there are times when they're just gonna tell you fuck off. Like don't care.
mm,
This application is made for this desktop entirely. So like your problem. I mean,
mm.
obviously, I'm putting it in a really really rude way. Like um like GNOME obviously like was seen in a much more like professional way. Um, and I don't really blame them for that because like when it comes to toolkit, it's really really difficult to maintain.
Mm.
You need, and if like what you suggest will require a lot of code to maintain, like a lot of time, a massive merge request and
Mm.
things like that. So I can understand why like they don't want to take that approach because it's just too much to maintain.
Well, my concern isn't like GNOME core apps. Like, if I get like things made specifically for the GNOME desktop are going to be designed in this way, but there's a lot of apps that are designed for GTK4, for example, that are designed as GNOME apps that sort of have the same issues, where it doesn't make any indication of the program that it's designed specifically for GNOME, but when you run it, it's really obvious what it's actually for.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think there's gonna have something like that anytime
Mm.
soon. But yeah, if they say like, oh, this app is like made for GNOME, that would be really nice though.
Yeah.
I can't deny that. Then it brings to another issue where like if people like newcomers, they won't really understand what a desktop environment is. They won't know what Plasma is or
Yeah.
GNOME is. And when they say, oh, this application is optimized for GNOME, they're gonna be like, what? Like, what's a GNOME? What?
Mhm.
Actually, no, not even what's a GNOME because they don't even know what GNOME is.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I understand there's certainly issues here, but this goes back to the documentation issue. Like, I think it's better to have it there than to not have it there. Even if like
Yeah, it
many
makes
users
sense.
aren't going to understand it, like if they're new to the system, I think for the people who do understand it, having it there is probably, at least for me, is definitely going to be better. It's going to save me a bit
Mhm.
of time for sure.
Yeah, that's where like these software front ends come in.
Hmm.
They show screenshots of the
Mm.
application, and like yeah, I understand that this isn't like you're more of a CLI guy,
Well, I
so
get a lot of stuff from, like, I check GitHubs for stuff as well. Like, if
yeah,
a lot of projects, I'll like check out their GitHub just, because a lot of the time they have their documentation there as well.
mhm. Okay, yeah. Speaking of that, like it really bothers me when apps
Hmm.
they don't show any screenshots in
Yep,
their like
I
readmes.
I agree.
Yeah, that's one of the things I hate the most. And obviously, like, it's not something you can just like submit a merge request and be like, oh, add these screenshots. I'd rather, because there are times when developers have like such terrible takes.
Hmm.
So, so better yet, like just open an issue, ask them, hey, can you add screenshots?
Hmm.
If they say no, well, you didn't have like any time wasted on submitting a merge request or taking screenshots and things like that.
Hmm.
But like, it's also a bad take on the developers end, things like that. But yeah, it really sucks. It really pisses me off when apps don't put screenshots in their README.
It's one thing if it's a CLI tool, you can get away with it like that. Like, I still prefer them, but
Yeah, same.
when it's a GUI, just include one. That's all. You don't need a like big array, you don't need a video demonstration, just a single screenshot. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know what's so difficult about that, or like why people overlook that. Uh,
Well,
but
it's
yeah,
even when you're on GitHub, like it's not like you're paying for the hosting anyway. It's not like you can even make that argument. Just press your screenshot button. Just do it. Take you
it
like
also
a
brings back.
minute.
Yeah, it also brings back to the issue like where no one wants to document, so they just don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is as good a place as any to end off the show. Documentation's a pain in the ass, and no one wants to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly how we started off. And also, if I remember right, you also asked like how I think about like how the future of the Linux desktop will go.
Mm.
If I remember right.
Yeah. I don't think we got into it on the show, but I did mention it on the Discord.
Yeah. I mean, if you want, I can share my thoughts.
Yeah, we can. I have to stop right now. It's just yeah, we can go into that. That's fine.
Like, yeah, like I think like because Flatpak is very like it's a collaborative project between many organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think like that's where we're going to head towards.
Mm-hmm.
And like since it also emulates like different architectures,
Mm-hmm.
that's also a really big upside from using Flatpak. And plus like reproducibility and things like that, um or like um it's not just like with Flatpak,
Mm-hmm.
you can make one manifest,
Mm-hmm.
one for ARM64, like with just one small section of the manifest, like the build script.
Yeah.
I guess you could say it. Um, you can make like one part of it ARM64 and the other side x86. So if someone if someone uses an ARM64 device, it will automatically pull the ARM64 binary or like archive, whatever it is. If they're using an x86 device, it's going to automatically like intelligent it's going to like it automatically like install and suggest the x86 app.
Mm-hmm.
And not just that, like especially like, with the rise of XDG portals, like we're already starting seeing integrations with Electron. GTK also has many portals integrated already. And you know those permission systems on Android, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're already starting to see that on Linux as well. Um,
That's gonna scare some
so like,
people. They don't like any change. Change is bad.
yeah, and I mean, the upside is that this only happens with sandbox environments.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using from a distribution package, they're not gonna ask any of those permissions.
Well, yeah, they
They're
wouldn't
just
need
gonna have
anything. Just
exactly. So like when you open a camera app on Android, it asks for like to access the camera, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's already a portal for that, like for your camera, and there's an application called Decoder
Mm-hmm.
that already does that. Um, Let me try to find a screenshot. Probably sent it. You probably saw it. I don't know.
You. Yeah, I saw the little icon you had for that. I've never seen this app though.
Uh, I did talk about it in your Discord server. Let me check.
might have. A lot of things that talked about in that server. There's a lot of things that I missed.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I found it.
Mm.
That. You can see it asks like turn on camera, and it actually works. And like of course this is because GNOME, they have a vision and they want to push the Linux for desktop forward.
Mhm.
They already like integrated these portals already, and many app developers who do like applications tailored for GNOME,
Mhm.
they want to use portals as much as possible. And like this application decoder, as far as I know, it has no access to your file system. It's an actual secure application. Um, because like yeah, it doesn't have any access to your file system.
Mhm.
It has very little amounts of permissions in general, and it doesn't even have access like your camera
Mhm.
by default because well the portal is in the use. It will ask for permissions before actually like using your camera.
Yeah.
And like obviously like this is a really nice thing, especially for not only the Linux desktop but the Linux mobile space.
Mm.
And I see it in a way that Linux mobile space is going to be a very like really big contributor factor for the Linux desktop because they're already like very bleeding edge. Like they're pushing Wayland already. Like many distributions already using Wayland, already using Flatpaks and FlatHub.
Mhm.
Like I don't know about Pipewire. Like I never had a Linux phone. I hope I do at some point. But like it, they do push a lot of those like bleeding edge technology, and that's a
Mhm.
really good thing, especially for the desktop because in many ways, in Linux mobile, they're in some ways already like ahead of the Linux desktop, despite being very new.
Yeah.
And like yeah, people will just say that Linux mobile isn't ready and all. Linux desktop isn't ready, and it's far from ready compared to Linux mobile. At least on Linux mobile, we have Waydroid, so
Mhm.
you can like you'll be able or you can run Android applications um on your phone. And I know that you can do the same thing with desktop, but like it's less Android apps are less in use compared to
Sure. Sure.
on mobile space. But yeah, like
I think when we
and
talk about Linux mobile not being ready, it's some people do focus on the software, but I think the main concern is the hardware side. Like the hardware is still very much geared to like even when you buy like a Pine phone, they very much say like this is for a developer. Like this is a developer system. If you're not a developer, if you're not someone who's trying to improve the Linux mobile experience, this might not be the device for you.
mhm. Yeah, and I don't think it's bad because
Mm.
like you gotta start somewhere, and it was often like that. Like a lot of those experimental stuff start in like other places like server space or like, SSDs, for example. They sucked at the beginning,
Yeah.
but now they're really practical. And it's the same thing. Like at the beginning, they will always suck. But it's just a matter of time. The price goes down. Um, we'll start seeing like better hardware for cheaper price,
Mhm.
better software as well, and like, better drivers, and just everything like regarding the Linux mobile.
I don't have a Linux phone myself. I don't really. I think the mobile space is interesting. It's just I'm already so involved in the desktop space. I don't know if I can justify spending all that time on mobile as well. Maybe I could make it work somehow, but I just don't really care about my phone. I just have it and then I use it. I don't even run like a custom ROM or anything. It's just there. It's just a phone.
Yeah, I went to that like distro phasing. Well, ROM custom ROM phasing.
Mhm.
Distro. Oh my god, custom ROM hopping phase.
Mhm.
Where I just tried many custom ROMs, and at some point I'm like, ugh, I'm bored of it. I just want my phone to work.
Yeah.
And I think on Linux, like I'll go back to that like phase where I'll just distro hop again and like learn, try out a lot of desktop environments and things like that. But like it's good to see like the mobile space, and it's not like GNOME, like that GNOME, they're focusing on like mobile, right? Like
Sure.
they're making. Sorry.
I was just saying, sure.
Yeah. So like, because like at some point, GNOME, like right now, it's a desktop environment,
Mhm.
but it's gonna be more of a general purpose environment. Like they're working really hard on mobile. Have you seen any like announcements or things like that about GNOME Mobile?
I did. There was a video that came out the other day where someone was scrolling through GNOME Mobile. I don't have the link on hand right now. Uh,
Yeah, and see, like a lot of those stuff, like desktop, like GNOME on the desktop end actually benefits as well.
mhm.
Um, and especially like I think it's called Samsung X or something like that. Dex, you know that? It's
Samsung. That's ringing a bell, but I'm not sure why. Samsung.
so like
Transform your phone into a powerful works. Yes. Okay, I know what this is.
yeah, and since like GNOME is shifting towards a um general purpose environment,
Mm,
like, and the fact that like I use GNOME and I can see like it's a really efficient desktop if
yeah.
you spend the time to learn it. And like once everything becomes like very mobile friendly on
Hmm.
GNOME Shell, like we will be able to like easily just switch to the desktop like environment of
Hmm.
GNOME, and it's going to work just fine without any like mobile limitation as well.
That sounds a lot more compelling with GNOME than it does with Samsung's skin for Android. Like, I get it. Like, you want to use one device, but GNOME sounds a lot more appealing for that. Like, it's a full fat Linux experience. It's not like this weird Android experience. Like, not really made for the desktop. Like, desktop Android never really picked up until they went down the Chrome OS route, which is doing it a little bit differently, but desktop
Yeah,
Android just never really made sense. But GNOME
yeah,
starts on the desktop, so if you have this experience that you can like share with one device, and you know, when we do get that powerful hardware, like right now, like you could do it. Like you could probably use you know the hardware in your phone, connect it to like a bigger display, and then you could have an experience. But like you don't really want to with the hardware we're seeing right now in the Linux phones. But give it time when we actually do start seeing that powerful hardware. I could imagine that being a pretty good way to have just one device you can carry around and just use wherever.
yeah, exactly. And that's what I really like about it. And it's not just that, like GNOME scales really well on a desktop.
Mm.
It scales really well on tablets and on laptops as well because like with Wayland, you can use like touch, like it has a really good
Mm.
touchscreen experience and trackpad experience. Now, of course, there's the Linux kernel limitation where like if your drivers suck, well, your GNOME experience is gonna be trash,
Mm.
unfortunately. But even then, like GNOME by itself, like, I have a Dell laptop with me. It runs so well on Wayland. Um, like I have the trackpad gestures and things like that. It works really well. And thankfully, even Plasma, they're making their like desktop environment friendlier to laptops and touchscreen devices, and I
Mm.
think that's a really nice thing.
I think the Linux mobile space is a space that it's kind of like looking back into the past of Linux. Like this is, Linux in 1998, for example. Like, people know about it, and, you know, some people use it, but it's still this very early thing that no one really is sure what's gonna happen with it. But it has this massive amount of room to grow. Especially now that, we're not in 1998. We have the hardware is available. So you have this like massive existing range you can already grow through. You're not limited by what is possibly available. So I don't know if it's ever going to be in a position where it's popular to use Linux on mobile, but I could see it getting to the point where it's kind of like Linux on the desktop, where it's not the main thing by any stretch of the imagination, but it is this thing that is entirely reasonable to use if you are more of a, you know, a hobbyist, more of an enthusiast, and then maybe from there, it can get to the point where it's, you anyone can, reasonably
Yeah.
go and use it. I think that's a while down the line, but I don't see it as being impossible.
Yeah. I think like now I don't really like. I'm not really sure if it will ever become popular,
Mm,
but I do think it will become successful because Windows Phone failed because it had like no support
yeah,
from
that was
application
Microsoft's fault.
devs.
They just released it. Well, it's not the first time they've done that. They did it like earlier. They had a partnership around the time the iPhone came out as well, and they just didn't do anything with it. And they keep doing like whenever Microsoft gets in the mobile space, they just don't do anything with it. Like you can't just release it and then expect the devs to come. They're not going to show up because no one's there already. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. But on Linux mobile, I think the main like savior we could say is Waydroid because
Mm,
you don't need application developers to package like as a Flatpak. Like if it's available on Android, well, users will be able to install Android apps
hmm
on Linux. And maybe like there might be limitations here and there, especially with safety net. Like
hmm
if you try to run your bank application, it's like, oh, your device isn't supported or
yeah.
it doesn't have safety net and things like that. But I think like uh, for the majority of apps, like, you'll be able to run them on the Linux desktop. Sorry, on
hmm
the Linux mobile, especially because like Waydroid, like it's it showed that it's a really good project. Like
hmm
um, if I remember right, um, you can install applications from Waydroid and it will automatically create desktop entries and launch it as if it's a Linux application.
hmm
So and things like that, like this, I think like Waydroid is one of the like biggest savior of the Linux mobile because it's basically wine
hmm
of mobile. Instead of like translating from DirectX or like Windows APIs, it's from Android to Linux.
Well, that's also much less of a barrier as well, because Linux kernel. It's not as big of a jump between those two because you still got that same base there. It's a very
Mhm.
modified base, but it's not like you know the Windows API calls are very very different from what is available on Linux, but the Linux API calls in many ways are still going to be there in the Android side. This is going to be extra things that Android needs as well.
Yeah, and even then, like Android is open source,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, there's
you
also
can
that.
inspect the
Yeah.
source code. Yeah, yeah. Like I really think, like I'm going. If there's releases a Librem 5 second generation,
Mhm.
I'll try to buy it as soon as I can because I really want a Linux phone.
Mhm.
And I want to support the development and things like that. And if I remember right, Purism also like donated or funds Waydroid, but I'm not too sure. It's still really cool that um for some it's sustainable as well.
Mm. Well, at a bare minimum, I there would be developers on it, if nothing else.
Mhm, yeah,
I don't have any plans to buy one anytime soon, but maybe I don't like to buy like early generation stuff. I tend to like wait until stuff has matured a bit. Um,
mhm,
but I could certainly see a day where, like how I'm running, Arch on my desktop, I'm running Linux on my phone. Um, I think we're in for a exciting couple of years. Yeah, maybe exciting like
yeah,
decade for Linux. Like we've got this shift over to Wayland happening that I would be very surprised if by, 2030 for example, we weren't heavily on Wayland by then. We have a lot of people are on Wayland now, but I think most of the shift is going to happen by then and there will still be the people holding on to X, but it's going to be a lot fewer than we have now. We have Flatpaks continually getting better. We have portals and other technologies being made around them to make them, generally usable on the desktop. And we have the Linux phone, which I don't think is going to hit mainstream appeal by then, but it very well might hit a point where the average Linux user would possibly consider using it as a daily driver.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I'm like that's what I want because
Mm,
like I don't really like Android and I don't like safety net and how Google is basically like putting all the dependencies to Google itself and
mm,
so like at least having a Linux device it's something that I would love to have
yeah.
in the near future. And even then like I know it's not going to be ready anytime soon, but if you really wish something to be good,
Mm,
it's best to contribute. It's best to like
yeah.
spend your time or money there so like at least you can give something back to the developer so they can continue working on their own stuff.
Well, yeah. When it comes to buying a device, in that respect, it kind of depends on how important you consider it, because
Yeah, of course.
that it's not like an iPhone 14, but it's still a lot of money, and a lot of people don't have that to spend. But you can still help out with things like documentation. Like, that's not something you necessarily
Yeah.
need to be hands on with the device.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And even then, like if you don't understand something, you can always ask the developers,
Mm,
like, "Hey, how does that happen?" Or like, "How does this work?" And they'll explain to you nicely.
yeah. Well, I think, yeah. We're gonna end it like 20 minutes ago. I think now is a good time to end. Unless you got something else you wanted to bring up.
I think everything's fine.
Okay, cool. Where can the people find you, find your work, things like that?
On my GitHub,
Mhm.
on my GitLab, and if you want, I can send you links. Actually, let me just send you
Yeah,
links.
I've got your website open right now. So GitHub here, that is on the Evil Skeleton. Your
Yeah.
GitLab is also the Evil Skeleton. Wow, you actually have better branding than I do. And then your website is on your GitLab, so it's also the evilskeleton.gitlab.io.
Yeah, and there's also the GNOME GitLab
Mm-hmm.
where yeah, so like when I do my contribution to GNOME.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a Mastodon. I also have a Twitter, but like I prefer using Mastodon and
Yeah, totally
recommending
fair.
Mastodon to users. Um, that's why, like I didn't put my Twitter on my website because like it's a secondary thing. Um, yeah, on Mastodon I post updates as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Any other things you want to mention? Or
no, I think everything should be good now.
okay, cool. As for me, the main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos and all that fun stuff there. The gaming channel is Brody Robertson Plays. I'm thinking of changing the name at some point. I have not done so. One day I'll do it though. Right now I'm playing through The World Ends With You and some other mystery game that I haven't decided yet. So show up for the stream and you'll find out. It might be a roguelike, it might not be. I don't know. I decide these things usually the day before I start streaming. If you're listening to the audio version of this, the video version is available on the YouTube at Tech Over Tea. The audio version you can find anywhere you can find podcasts. There's an RSS feed, it'll be on like iTunes, all that stuff, so you'll find it somehow. Give me a last word. What do you want to say?
I mean, I guess it was I enjoyed talking with you. I think it was a really fun experience. Especially like it's my first time being in like in a podcast
Mhm.
like that. And yeah, like I did better than I thought because at first I was a bit stressful. I'm like, oh no, like what am I gonna? Hopefully, I'm not gonna say anything stupid. But now it's I
Don't
think
worry,
I'm
I'm here to do
proud of
that.
myself. Nice.
Uh, I think what I've noticed is anybody who worries if they're going to do well on a podcast generally. So there's two people who do well on their first their first podcast with me, the people who worry about doing a podcast and the people who have their own podcast, which usually worry about it anyway. If you're like fully confident, like this is gonna be great, I am gonna be speaking perfectly, usually it's terrible. Well, yeah, that's gonna be it for me. So, I'm out.
Uh, Goodbye.